Welcome to session 354 of the Bible in a Year commentary. We started this series on the 1st of January, then today should be the 20th of December. Today we'll be looking at Revelation 17 to 18 and Psalm 44. But so far in Revelation, we've read through the messages to the 7 churches, the courtroom scene, and the 3 sets of 7 divine judgments. Revelation, attributed to John, reveals the spiritual battles behind earthly struggles, asking, will you choose light or darkness? Addressed to the 7 churches in Asia Minor, it presents Jesus as the ruler of kings, cleansing believers through his blood and uniting Daniel 7 imagery of God and the Son of Man. John describes 7 lampstands representing the churches and stars for their angels, with Jesus commissioning him to deliver messages. Ephesus needed renewal. Smyrna was encouraged to stay faithful. Pergamum and Thyatira faced corruption. Sardis needed revival. Philadelphia was promised protection, and Laodicea was urged to recognize its spiritual poverty. These messages reminded believers of the spiritual battle and called for their repentance. John saw heaven's throne where 24 elders symbolized humanity's restored role as the co-rulers with God. Living creatures and elders worshipped while a scroll with 7 seals awaited opening. Declared worthy, the Lion of Judah appeared as a slaughtered lamb with 7 horns, symbolizing his authority. The lamb's blood redeemed people from all nations, forming a kingdom of priests. Worship spread to all creation. The lamb then opened the seals, bringing 3 cycles of 7 judgments. The first seal summoned the horsemen, war, conflict, famine, and death. The 5th revealed martyred believers waiting God's plan, and the 6th brought apocalyptic upheaval. Between the 6th and 7th seals, John saw believers marked with God's seal and a vast multinational crowd purified by the Lamb. The 7th seal brought silence before the day of the Lord. The 7 trumpets echoed Egypt's plagues, symbolizing divine warnings. Between the 6th and the 7th trumpet, an angel announced the 7th would reveal God's mystery and final judgment. John then measured the temple, representing believers as God's true temple, and referenced 3.5 years, signifying a period cut short. 2 witnesses, symbolizing the church, prophesied with power, but were seemingly defeated by a beast. Like Jesus, the church then rose again, leading to the 7th trumpet, proclaiming Jesus' eternal reign. John then describes signs of a spiritual battle. A woman representing God's people gave birth to a son, Jesus, who was taken to God for safety. A red dragon, Satan, waged war in heaven and was defeated by the archangel Michael and cast to earth, where it persecuted believers. 2 beasts arose, representing oppressive empires and false worship. The mark of the beast signified allegiance to evil powers, contrasting God's mark on believers. During this persecution, John saw the Lamb on Mount Zion with 144,000 loyal followers. 3 angels proclaimed worship to God, Babylon's fall, and judgment on the beast's followers. Jesus then harvested believers while angels harvested for God's wrath. 7 final judgments unleashed plagues, blood, and fire, echoing Egypt again and then declaring Babylon's fall, urging loyalty to God. So let's jump into today's reading, Revelation 17 to 18. Moving on from the 3 rounds of 7 judgments, John picks up the language of Babylon as a great empire that will be destroyed. An angel comes and tells John about a woman that they described as a great whore that has seduced kings and got the people of the earth drunk. She is seated on many waters because she embodies chaos, drawing on that idea of seas being chaotic. And then John is taken out into the wilderness to see her, the place of decreation. The language of both draws on Isaiah 21 verse 1, which mentions the wilderness of the sea, and goes on to talk about Babylon's doom. The angel then takes John to see this woman, and her imagery draws from the whore language used to describe Israel when it was turning from God in the prophets. See Jeremiah 2 verse 34 and Jeremiah 4 verse 30. Except here, she is sat on the back of the dragon. In the prophets, it was Israel that was allowing itself to be tempted by its lovers, the other nations that it flirted with. Here, this woman leads other nations to sleep with her and get drunk off of her. She is wealthy and has the name Babylon written on her head, while drunk off the persecution of believers. We're also going to see a bride appear later on in the book, and so what's being set up is another contrast. Those who are like a whore, rebelling against God and leading others to do the same, or those who are like faithful brides of Christ. The angel then starts to unpack what the woman represents. The beast she is sitting on is the one that has been cast to the pit and is now coming out. All those who are not faithful to God will be enamored and amazed with the beast. The angel then points out that the 7 horns of the beast are 7 mountains that the woman sits on. This is Rome, as Rome was built on 7 hills. The references to Babylon do not literally mean Babylon, but the great empires that openly flirt with the forces of evil. For John, this was Rome, who conquered much of the known world, and was the main economic driver of the world. All nations would be doing trade with it and influenced by it, and it was persecuting believers. In some sense then, the beast and the whore represent the same thing, oppressive empires, but 2 sides of oppressive empires. The beasts are the warfaring side that bring death and destruction. The woman is the economic and corrupting side of empires that lead people to live corrupt lives against God and tie them up in economic systems. Like Daniel 7, verse 7 to 8, here the horns of the beast represent different kings and empires. They submit to the authority of the beast and wage war against the Lamb, but their time will be cut short, only lasting 1 hour each. There are lots of debates over which leaders each horn represents, but I think that misses the point. The horns represent all leaders who set themselves up against God. They each ride on top of empires, nations, and powers that they lead. But these empires, nations, and powers are greater than individual leaders. And it is the empires, nations, and powers that submit to the greater beast, the dragon, the ultimate embodiment of evil. The important thing is that while these leaders wage war against the Lamb will defeat them, for he is the Lord of lords and King of kings. It's Revelation 17, verse 14. Then the angels point out that the waters that the woman is seated on are the people, the nations, and the languages that she has corrupted. And at some point, the beast will devour her. In short, chaos can't help but destroy itself. Corrupt economic powers will lead for a bit, but they will always give way to war. And so another angel comes and declares judgment over Babylon. This is drawing on many different oracles of judgment against Babylon found in the Old Testament. See Isaiah 47 verses 1 to 15, Jeremiah 50 to 51, Ezekiel 21 verses 28 to 32, and Zephaniah 2 verses 9 to 15. Babylon will fall. It has become the dwelling place of all that is corrupt and evil. It has made other nations drink of its corruption, whether that be through political or economic influences. Heaven calls to all believers who find themselves in Babylon to come out from her and not let her corrupt them. Her sins are high and she has lived in luxury. Therefore she will face great judgment, and the rest of the world will mourn her loss because of her economic power. Merchants who traded with her, selling her their wares, will no longer have anyone to sell to. But heaven and all believers should rejoice that her evil has been defeated. A mighty angel picked up a great millstone and threw it into the sea, drawing on Jeremiah 51:63, where a book containing Babylon's judgment was bound to a stone and thrown into the Euphrates. Babylon will be defeated by violence, and its culture and trade will be no more. There will be no joy or celebration in her, for she has corrupted nations and their merchants and persecuted believers. As mentioned, the focus of this section is to provide an economic view of what's going on. Up until now, the focus has been on showing believers throughout history the significances of the wars and disasters that they see. Here, believers are being shown the significance behind the empires and their economic corruption, along with the oppression that it brings. God sees it, it is not good, and it will ultimately be consumed by the chaos that it feeds. And the unspoken question continues: will you engage in that corruption, or will you set yourself apart for God? But that is Revelation 17 to 18. Now let's look at Psalm 44. This psalm is attributed to the sons of Korah and falls into the category of lament psalm. Specifically, the psalm was recited after the nation had faced a loss in battle. The psalm alternates between the people and their king as they work through the lament before God. On top of that, the psalm is split into 3 sections: the declaration of trust, which is Psalm 44 verses 1 to 8. They then bring their complaint before God, which is verses 9 to 22, and then they ask God to intervene, which is verses 23 to 26. Here's a summary of the structure, but I would recommend checking out the written version of this commentary in the description to see the structure properly for yourself. We have verses 1 to 3, the people remember what God has done. Verse 4, the king declares God the ultimate king. Verse 6, the king acknowledges he cannot trust in his own might. Verses 7 to 8, the people boast in God and give thanks. Verses 9 to 14, the people lament their loss. Verses 15 to 16, the king declares his shame. Verses 17 to 22, the people declare their innocence and commitment to God. And then verses 23 to 26, both the people and the king ask God to help them. The people have just lost a battle, but before they bring their complaint before God, they decide to ground themselves in his past faithfulness. They remind themselves of the stories their ancestors passed down, of when God drove their enemies from the land so that they could occupy it, and how it was God's might, not the strength of their swords, that won that battle. The king then acknowledges that it is God who is truly the king that leads them out of battle. The people place their trust in God. Just as it was God that won the battles of their ancestors, it will be God that helps them defeat their enemies now. The king accepts the fact that he cannot trust in his own might to win battles. The people then remind themselves of times in their own lives where God has rescued them and defeated their enemies. Because of this, they will boast in God and give thanks to him. Now that the people are grounded in their confidence in God, they move to their complaint. For whatever reason, God has rejected them by allowing their enemies to defeat them this time. Their enemies have looted their wealth and killed their people. Israel has become a laughingstock amongst the nations, who now mock them. The king speaks from a personal point of view. There is such a sense of shame and disgrace on him because he was the one that led the people out into battle only to be defeated. The people then defend their case before God. They have not been faithless or turned their back on him. They ask God to search them and their hearts because they are confident in their own innocence. Emboldened by their complaint, both the people and the king now ask God to intervene. They ask him why he seems to be sleeping or hiding himself from them. Why does he now seem to be okay with oppression? The unspoken statement here is that it doesn't line up with who God is. They point once more to the suffering and then ask God to save them.
Thanks for joining us today. Take a moment to reflect on what you've read and share your thoughts or questions below. If you're watching in the future, then you can click here for the next session, or you can find the full playlist just down here. To receive these daily commentaries in your email inbox, subscribe via the link in the description below. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.